I think it's very hard to kind of look at Elon Musk's personal conduct on the platform and feel in any way proud of that.
I have a bit of a thesis about this, which is that though the tech companies always resist the idea that they're journalists and they say, well, it's not their job to come up with original stuff, they're mere platforms, the fact is they are doing a huge amount of what journalism used to do. And people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and indeed Nick Clegg and other people who run these platforms are, in my view, in effect, the new editors of the internet, except that they are infinitely more powerful than the editors of the pre-internet world. Elon Musk has got very directly involved in British politics this week. He described Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of this country, as two-tier Keir, and he said that the rioting on our streets is, in effect, the early stages of a civil war. One tweet from Elon Musk can fundamentally change a narrative. And we see here the way in which social media can encourage the promulgation and the creation of conspiracy theories. And often it's very powerful people like Mr. Musk, like President Donald J. Trump, who are just raising questions. And by raising those questions, seem to undermine the truth and denigrate the possibility of a consensus on what has actually happened. For instance, with those dreadful killings in Southport. Because what happened after the appalling, unconscionable slaughter of those girls and the attack on some of their friends and carers in Southport is that people were able to go on one of these platforms, Twitter/X, create fake accounts, anonymous accounts, and promote falsehood, which was then taken up by powerful people. These false claims, these conspiracies on social media are having very big non-digital real-world consequences. That is the nature and the power of social media.
I remember, Amal, when Nick Clegg took over policy at Meta and you interviewed him in Brussels, pretty much the day that he took over. And already they'd changed their tune. There was a sense in which that phrase co-regulation was actually quite welcomed. Things like the Online Safety Act coming in the UK and EU legislation, that they really didn't want to be the arbiters of truth anymore. Now, whether you think they still like playing God in that respect, certainly my impression is that Elon Musk is much more of an individual personality doing that. You have policy teams, content policy teams in most of the large platforms, but I would say not so much in Twitter anymore, that would be looking at individual pieces of content. You know, there was an entire team in Twitter that was dedicated to countering child abuse material, to countering designated terrorist content. Those people were pretty much immediately laid off when Elon Musk took over.
So what was happening when you were working there a few years ago and you get news of this bid from this guy? He's a very active tweeter himself.
Yes.
He had quite an interesting ding dong with Parag Agrawal, who was the then boss of Twitter.
Yes.
And I remember he put out a note saying what Twitter really needs is a fire. Parag's a nice guy, but what Twitter needs is a fire-breathing dragon. What was that like from the inside?
It's really weird. I would say that, obviously when something like that happens, obviously it kind of focuses your mind entirely. But as I remember it, pretty quickly, I think Elon Musk kind of said, actually, I don't really want to buy Twitter. And so we assumed that we were kind of in a period of months, perhaps years of kind of legal wrangling. And that, best thing to do, therefore, is just to focus on what we're trying to do. And that was very much the message that kind of Parag gave us, and we tried to do it. When it happened, it all happened very, very quickly. So by the middle of October, you literally have 1 week of carrying on business as usual because he made his bid 6 months ago. And the next week he was walking into Twitter HQ in San Francisco with a sink.
With a sink? Because what was the metaphor there? That he was going to throw the kitchen sink?
Sink in. Let that
sink in, that was it, not throw the kitchen sink, yeah.
And to be honest with me, in my personal opinion, I think that's as good as it got for him running the company.
Why'd you say that?
Well, because I think, he kind of had this moment of kind of coming in and buying Twitter, and I think that was his kind of moment for triumph. But I think immediately the size and complexity of running an important platform like Twitter has kind of got away from him. I think he's looking for simplistic or simpler solutions to things that are, as we've discussed, incredibly complex.
So how do you characterise his stewardship of the company so far?
I mean, it's really not good, is it? In terms of, to be fair to X, they would say, well, our users are up. I'm not entirely sure what data is kind of showing that. And they would make a point about free speech, of course they would. I think externally you would go, well, actually, it appears to be stagnant in terms of the actual kind of health of the platform. Generally, the quality of replies and debate on Twitter just seems to have gone, downhill. And it was never perfect, but, you could always have some sort of, fun and chats. As ever with these things, you're kind of dealing with anecdotes and your own experience and your own timeline. But also fundamentally, the stuff we're talking about today, we used to recognize that Twitter wasn't perfect, but we thought there's a force for good in the world. We were proud of the way certain people used it to get their voice across that might not previously have been heard. I think it's very hard to kind of look at, Elon Musk's personal conduct on the platform and feel in any way proud of that. So, for example, even last week, it's one thing to re-platform Tommy Robinson. It's another to personally interact with him, as he did last week. I think Tommy Robinson tweeted something out and he replied with 2 exclamation marks, which he often does. And, knowing when you've got 190 odd million followers, when you choose to do that, and it is a choice, you're amplifying that message on a personal level. So I think there's 2 different things. There's kind of what Twitter have done as an organisation, what X have done since he took over, and then his personal conduct. And I think it's for everyone to kind of individually judge whether, they agree with his personal conduct. I certainly don't.
He would say the company was heading for bankruptcy. He would say, as he did to one of my colleagues, James Clayton on the BBC, said, you've got 4 months, you're running out of money. What are you going to do? You're massively overstaffed. You've got all these people who aren't fire-breathing dragons, who aren't hungry for it.
Yeah.
The company's not well run. It's not growing.
Yeah.
It's ineffective. Now, one point on which I think he would concede that things have not worked out for him is that there's been this massive advertiser boycott, and it might be that it's because of the way he's run the company. But what would you say to his point that the company was stagnant before he took over?
I'd say Twitter was always compared to platforms like Facebook and stuff. So on Wall Street and running it as a kind of public open company, you're always going to get compared to Facebook. They launched at roughly the same sort of time, and obviously the valuation of Meta, if you want to take a hard-headed business perspective, way exceeded that of Twitter. But it wasn't trying to do that. It was trying to be something different. It was there to try and serve the public conversation. I think the options open to Elon Musk were, one, well, don't bid for it. I think he had this sort of sense that he sort of came in and was saving Twitter from something, but I'm not sure he ever really defined what it was he was saving it from. And then the other option is, if you come in, you're running a business, assess what needs to be done, keep a clear head, speak to the people in the company who know what they're talking about. He literally fired the whole of the US leadership team within the first 2 weeks. So, he is responsible for a significant amount of the problems that Twitter's had, and in particular for decline in advertising revenue.
His argument, and we should, engage with it properly, is who the hell are you to decide who's trusted? Who the hell is Twitter to decide that the BBC or CNN or The Independent or the Daily Mail are more trusted than, for instance, Tommy Robinson? And his argument is that actually the whole revolution of social media is it's democratized social media and it's taken power and that decision making away from the hands of the few and given it to the many. What do you think to that?
But I think we're seeing his argument play out in the streets in the last week, and we're seeing it play out in some of the horrendous things that we're seeing. So, for me, it's not a kind of theoretical discussion in a sixth form about free speech and what it might mean theoretically. It's about what's the real world impact of some of this stuff.
But it's not going to stop a riot in Middlesbrough.
Not right now.
So Elon Musk is a massive stitch up by all you lefty commercial rascals. Power for pound Twitter does feel a dark place to me right now.